Yeah, can't do this.
Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Man.
Obey.
So, what we actually completed all of Chaye Sarah last year. So, normally on Sunday, anyway, we do this is Sunday, and normally we do Torah T'mimah, but we are going to work on Torah T'mimah this week as much as we can. So, we're in Parshat Lech Lecha in here, and we're actually dealing with chapter 14, which talks about this battle, right, of the four kings against the five kings and Abraham's participation in that. It's an unusual chapter. It really is. The style of the chapter is somewhat unusual, and it's the point that it tries to make ultimately is how it fits into the Torah in general, and we'll see that it has to do with the sharp contrast between Lot's values and Abraham's values, and the way in which that functions in terms of how we act as human beings and how profound it is. At any rate, what's happened is that these five kings were subject to to King Kedar Laomer, and they rebelled for 13 years, and in the 14th year, Kedar Laomer and three other kings, his allies, came and mounted a campaign uh, to try and get the five kings subject again, once again, to prevent them from their rebellion. So here we go. I think, sorry, the my computer does interesting things. So, I want to make sure I'm at the right place here. Yes. Kol ele chavru el emek hasidim. All of these, in other words, all these kings and their armies gathered together at the valley of Sidim. Sid is actually lime or plaster. So it could be that that's what they were able to get there. Hu Yam HaMelech. You could identify that as the Dead Sea. Yam HaMelech literally it means the Salt Sea. I'm going to look and make sure. So this is where we're going to pick up Torah T'mimah at verse 6. Shtei Esrei Shana. So here we go. For 12 years, Avdu et Kedar Laomer, they served Kedar Laomer. Ushlosh Esrei Shana Maradu. Right? In the 13th year, they rebelled against Kedar Laomer. Uva Arba Asrei Shana, and in the 14th year, Ba Kedar Laomer Uvahamlachim Asher Ito, Kedar Laomer and the kings that were with him came, Vayaku et Rephaim. They went on this major campaign, and I think the fact that this is mentioned here is to tell us that the Canaanites were not the first inhabitants of the land of Canaan. Right, so they smote the Rephaim. These four kings smote the Rephaim, be'ashtarot karnaim in Ashtarot karnaim, ve'et hazuzim bahem and the zuzim amongst them, ve'et ha'emim and the emim b'shavei kiryatayim in shavei could mean the plain of Kiryatayim. So the point is that these are not Canaanites that we're talking about, that they were in fact destroyed by or conquered by these other kings, and that in fact the land of Canaan never ultimately belonged to the Canaanites. So I think that's the point that the Torah is making, is that the Canaanites were not native to that particular area. Going on, there was really a major campaign. The Et HaChori Bahararam Seir, and the Chorites in their mountain country of Seir, right? Seir eventually came under the position of Esau, the descendants of Esau. So you can see we're reading about earlier peoples that were there in that area. Ad El Paran, up until the valley of Paran. Rashi comments on that. This is, let me make sure. Yes, Meishar, I would actually translate it as a plain. So maybe I will change this. Let me see quickly what Rashi says, if I can find it. Yeah, Mishor. Yeah, okay. So he actually, Rashi makes the point. So I'm going to put the plain. Me sure would be a better translation would be the plain of Paran. And Rashi says actually that this term el, even though here we go, here's where Onkelos translates it as Meshar. Nevertheless, Rashi points out that the term ale refers only to ale paran. The word ale never refers to a plain in any other context. Asher al Hamidbar, which would be close to the wilderness, close to the wilderness. All right, so let's take a look. The et hachori and the chori. Tanya. So Tanya means it's we've come across this word a number of times. Essentially, it means it's taught, but it's a technical word, and but it refers to a source that is from the Mishnaic period. In other words, prior to the year 200. Lama nikra shmo hori. Why is this people called Horite? Why are they called Hori? Okay, or maybe it's Chori. Let me look carefully. Yes, it's Chori. Chori. Why were they known as Chorites? Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, said Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani. So the fact that it says Rav and doesn't say Rabbi makes me feel that Tanya here simply does not necessarily mean that it's early, that it also could mean from after the year 200, because the term Rav generally is referred to rabbis who lived in Babylonia during the Talmudic period, which would be after the year 200. So, and Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, I'm pretty sure, is known as an Amora. The teachers of that period are known as Amoraim, right? Amar Rabbi Yonatan, said Rabbi Yonatan, and again, Rabbi Yonatan could be a later rabbi, just an earlier rabbi than Shmuel bar Nachmani. What did he say? Make sure. So, Merichim et haaretz, that they sniff the land. They actually sniff the land itself. So let's take a look at what Torah T'mimah says about this. I want to make sure. Here we go. Darish Chori. Okay, how does he get this? He interprets the word Chori behefech otiot milashon reach. So what he does is he takes the letters, the last two letters of and he reorganizes these letters, right? He transposes the letters from Chori, so he switches them around, right? From Chori to Reach. Okay, that's how he gets. And lahariach means to smell, to sniff out, etc. All right, or to smell. Lahariach would actually mean to smell, not as, in other words, the something that smells. But here it talks about them sniffing, right? And so Torah T'mimah starts to give other examples where words have the same meaning, even though the letters are transposed, right? So, for example, keves, which means a lamb, okay, and kesev. So you see how they've transposed the keves to kesev. Salma, simla. So simla is like a dress or a robe, and here you can see that again the mem and the lamed are transposed, but they both mean the same thing. And he gives quite a number of examples. Anka, naaka. Again, the transposition of that is anka is a camel, right? Za'ava, so it says za'ava, zava'a. I believe that's a word that means quake. I looked it up, and that appeared to be what the translation was of this. Another one, okay? Ola Okay, I think avla, the vav would be pronounced here. Avla and alva, which means a wrong, to do something, to do a wrongful action. Here we go. Lashon algim, I believe, and here nil'ag lashon. So algim again means to mock, a mocking tongue. But again, notice the transposition of that is. So he says there are many examples, and he gives it quite a number of them. So how Rabbi Yonatan does this. So from Chori he gets Reach, Ruchi, something like that, right? So what is this really talking about? That they were sniffing the land. Inyanhu, and the business is what we're really talking about, he says. Shahayu yodim etz kulat utchunat v'teva haaretz, that they had this amazing understanding of the various the value, the quality of the disposition of the land, that they understood, it's the direction, the soil quality, etc. They had a tremendous understanding of berecha. Berecha means, in other words, how it smelled. They could smell the earth, and they could tell whether it was acid or alkaline, and the various elements that it had. Mara uila, and from this they knew what was fit to grow in it, in that particular place. Uche'ein ma shekatuv al hapasuk, and it's similar to what is written regarding the verse to Sof Parshat Vayishlach, at the end of Parsha Vayishlach, Ele b'nei Seir HaChori. So it says, these are the descendants of Seir, the Chori, who were Chorites, Yoshvei Haaretz, who dwelt in the land. And so that's the verse, right? And the commentary is atu, and this is an expression of surprise. Kuli alma yoshvei rakia. Do you mean to say that everyone else lives in the heavens? So that's why we're pointing out that they lived on the earth. Since, I mean, why mention that they lived on the earth after all? So it's sort of saying, well, everybody lives on the earth. Why mention it, right? Yoshvei rakia heim. So everyone else dwells in the heavens. Ella, however, shehayu bekiim beyishuva shel aretz or eretz, but they were experts, right, as to how to settle the land. That's why they say Yoshvei Haaretz. It doesn't mean they dwelt in the land literally, but that they understood how to settle the land. Shahayu, going on to explain, Shahayu Omrim, because they would be able to say, these people, Malay Kaneze, this reed, it's a measurement, right? This measurement of land, Ze Lazait, this particular measurement of land is appropriate to grow olive trees. Malo Kaneze, this particular area, this reed, Ligafanim, this would be appropriate for grapevines. Malo Kaneze, the Ta'anim, this would be a fitting place for figs. Okay, Klomar, that is to say, b'makom ze ra'ui legadel zayit. So what they're saying is, in this particular location, it's appropriate to raise olive trees, uvazeh geffen, in this particular place, grapevines, uvazeh te'ena kudama, and in this particular place, fig trees, etc. And if you've done any gardening, you know that the amount of sunlight, whether it's north, south, etc., whether the soil is alkaline or acidic, it all has a tremendous effect on the success of what you plant there. You have to take those sorts of things into account, and then there are also trace elements that can be very important in terms of the health of a plant. Uve'inyan hayidi'ah bareach, and he says, as to knowing through sniffing, right, through smelling, this idea here, hu lashon militzi, it's actually a figurative expression. Al rochav v'hafrazat yidi'ah. It's talking about the breadth and the extent of the understanding. In other words, how quick they were to understand fully what was going on. She'af berech bilvad. That is to say that just by smelling, right? Tofsin hayidiyah, they already understand hadrusha that is required, v'hamuchletet, and the decided, the ultimate knowledge regarding this. In other words, it's using to smell it out is simply a figurative expression saying that it didn't take much for them to come to a complete understanding of what was going on. And he gives an example. Uke'ein ma shekatuv melitza kazo, and it's similar to a similar figurative expression, Sanhedrin Tzadik Gimel Bet, in the tractate Sanhedrin, page 93b, B'ma'alotav shel Mashiach, talking about the qualities, right, of the Messiah. Dichtiv Bei, because regarding the Messiah it says V'heiricho beyirat Hashem, and he can sniff out through his fear of God. I think that's what this is trying to say, and he's going to explain. Sheyeh more, I think this is Moreach Vadain, right? So that he is able to determine, right, with certainty. And so that's what it says in Sanhedrin, right? Upiresh Rashi, and Rashi explains that expression, Keshebaim Shnaim Ladun, that when two people come for a judgment, who ach meiriach bahim, he just has to sniff at them, right? He just has to smell them. V'yodea mi hu hachayav, and he immediately knows who is the guilty party, etc. Uma denafka. So again, it's saying that he can figure it out very quickly. What's going on here? Let's see, Uma de nafka mina beklal drashazo, and going on, he goes on to say, in the sort of practical application, what we learn out from, in general, from this particular interpretation, shelafanenu, that's before us, ladina. I think this means in terms of halacha. Niva'er im yetz Hashem, we will explain, God willing, besof parsha vayishlach, at the end of parsha vayishlach. So that that's the first little piece here, which he then explains how this is used as a figurative expression to explain how well these people understood. They were great. I guess we could call them agronomists, right? Okay, so the Rav Acha, there's a difference of opinion here. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, but Rav Acha, the son of Yaakov, said, "Shene'esu bnei chorin minichsehen." So again, he does the transposition. He interprets the name Chorites, right? Bnei chorin. Bnei chorin means free, minichsehem, and I think it means free of their property. They were no longer attached to their property. And this is from Tractate Shabbat, page 65a. Here we go. Klomar, that is to say, shenitradu minachalatam. They were separated from their inheritance. Ukemoshe katuv, as is stated, and this is in Parshat Varim, right? Uvnei Esav Yirshum, and the descendants of Esau disinherited them. So originally they were Chorites, and the descendants of Esau conquered them and took them. They no longer owned that. Velo hutzrechu, and they no longer were needed. La'avod, let's keep going. Admatam, to work their land. V'ulai gam b'muvan zeh, and perhaps in this terms of understanding what we mean by being free of something, al derech shamur, it's similar to the expression Chazal that our sages of blessed memory said, al hakatuv, regarding the verse that says, uval hashor naki, that where it says, and the owner of the ox is clean, right? That's what the word naki means literally. And here we're talking about an ox that gored, right? that gored. I believe it's either another ox or possibly even a person that we're talking about. I'd have to go back and actually look. I believe this is in Parshat Mishpatim, where they talk about what happens if an ox gores or kills a person, and of course it's a terrible thing. And but on the other hand, if it was not a goring ox, right? If in fact the ox had never gored before, it's saying that the owner of the ox is essentially is not held guilty, is not Adam Shomer. It's similar. This is what the sages say. It's like someone who, the expression that someone says, Yatsa ploni nakim nechasav, a person is gone free of his possessions. I believe what this means. I've always understood it to mean that it means they no longer have any connection to their possessions. In other words, possibly it means that he's become poor, right? He's no longer has those things anymore. And so likewise, when it says the owner of the ox is clean, meaning he is not considered responsible for what his ox did. And I say that with a slight question mark to say that I say that without absolute certainty, but I think that's what we're talking about there. So this is probably a good place for us to stop here. Let me just see how much further we go. We may be able to do some at least a little bit more of the verses, right? So we can try and do that. So there's no Torah T'mimah here. Let's see. Okay, so let's just in the time that we have, let's just do some of the verses that we have in the Torah. Vayashuvu, they returned. So they went through this down to this area, and then they returned. Vayavu el Ein Mishpat. They came to Ein Mishpat, he Kadesh, which is also known as Kadesh. Vayaku et kol sdei ha'amaleki, and they smote the entire area of the Amalekites, the field, literally, of the Amalekites, v'gam et ha'emori, and also the Amorites, ha'yoshev b'chatzatzon Tamar, who dwelt in Chatzatzon Tamar. Now, what's interesting is that the Amalekites didn't exist at the time. Amalek is a descendant of Esau, and this is way before, it's way before Esau and Jacob were born. So when it talks about the Amalekite, the field of the Amalekites, it must be talking about an area that eventually became the property or the possession of the Amalekites. And so it is speaking in terms of a later period as to identifying these areas. So, Vayetze Melech Sodom, and the king of Sodom went out, Umelech Amorah, the king of Amorah, Umelech Adma, and the king of Adma, Umelech Tzvoyim, and the king of Tzvoyim, Umelech Bela, Hitzar, and the king of Bela, also known as Zoar. These are the names of these five cities. Vayarchu itam milchama be'emek hasidim, and they waged war with them in the plain of, or in the valley of Sidim, the valley of Sidim. And just it keeps mentioning these names. It's interesting how it mentions the names of these kings and repeats the names. Kedar Laomer Melech Elam, Kedar Laomer, the king of Elam. By the way, Elam essentially is in Babylonia. V'tidal Melech Goyim, Tidal the king of Goyim, v'Amraphel Melech Shinar, Amraphel the king of Shinar, v'Aryoch Melech Elasar, Aryoch king of Elasar, Arba'am Lachim et HaChamisha, the four kings against the five. Ve'emek Hasidim be'erot Chemar, and the valley of Sidim was filled with pits of bitumen. V'yanusu melech Sodom va'amorah, and the king of Sodom and Amorah fled. Vayiplu shama, and they fell there. V'hanisharim heranasu, and the remaining soldiers, etc., they fled to the mountains. Make sure, yeah, okay. Going on a little bit. We'll go up to there. Vayichu et Lot ve'et Nechusha ben Achi Avraham, and they took Lot and his possessions. the son, Lot, the son of Abram's brother, Vayelechu, and they departed. Vahu Yoshev b'Sodom, referring to Lot. Lot was dwelling at Sodom at the time. And we'll stop right here and pick it up next at our next
Did you
list.
read verse 11?
Yes. Vayikhu et
Okay,
kol
I heard 10 and
Sodom.
12.
Yeah, no, no, no. We haven't done, yeah. I'm sorry. You're right. I did not read verse 11. Forgive me. Thanks, Lauren. Thank you for being so diligent. Like, thank you. So, right, because I saw Vaikhu, and so I
Yeah, it's there
unfortunately,
twice.
yes. Vaikhu et kol rechush Sodom. They took all the property of Sodom, va'amorah, and Amorah, ve'et kol ochlam v'yechlu, and all their food, and they departed. And now it mentions, of course, taking Lot. Thanks, Lauren. I'm sorry. I don't know how I managed to do that, but I did. So, yes, we did. Now we've taken care of 11. By the way, when they talk about Sodom and Amorah, I think they're just being a little abbreviated. They're, of course, referring to all five cities that are mentioned in this particular battle. So, with that, we'll stop our text study for now. And I'm going to stop the share. Any comments, any thoughts, etc. for the record? Well, hi, Nick. Good to see you. I don't get
You.
that.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, I don't get that pleasure too often.
I'm still waiting for the books on tape you're going to be doing with that beautiful voice you have.
Yeah, right.
They were on the computer.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I will stop the recording.